So,
Steps that we have to go.
Let me see y'all on TV.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know, someone wrote on the website where they were really disappointed with Christians not turning out like they thought they would. So I really hope that there are people, I mean, the hard thing is that it's during a work day, you know, where most people are,
Yeah.
but they did for lunch, I guess, from 12 to 1, so.
So our lesson is integrity. And it's, I think y'all kind of know the story that it's going to be of Ananias and Sapphira and their lack of integrity, I guess. And when this is, it's just right after the apostles had been attacked and arrested and such, and it talks about in before this in the reading we don't have just how the church was working then. Interesting, this is the first time that the church was mentioned actually in the Bible, in the New Testament, when they started calling it the church. But they were all working together when needs came up, either families that were part of the church or help the poor or whatever. People would say, well, I've got this extra, I'm going to sell it, or maybe not extra, but they would sell it, give the money to the church, and they would use that money. And it goes on to say no one was in need. And so everything was working good. And then it just goes through some stories here of kind of examples of good and bad of that. And that's kind of what we want to talk about here is what we should be doing as far as just giving to the church. And I don't think it's just money, just stuff. I mean, it's also our time and exactly who we're dealing with when we did that. And I think that's one of the biggest things here of the problem with Ananias and Sapphira is they didn't realize who they were dealing with when they went to do things. And so first we just talk about integrity, but when we're dealing with the church, right or wrong, we talked about things today, you know, it happened in the church leadership. Who are we dealing with? Who did Ananias, before we get in, I mean, we know the story. Who were they trying to fool? Huh?
God.
Is that who they were trying to fool? You think?
Well, they were seeking the praise of their fellow believers, so they were really trying to fool the congregation.
Right. And so what did they find out? Who were they dealing with?
Well, they were dealing directly with God. They just didn't know it.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I think we have to understand when you're dealing with, boy, how do you say it? When you're dealing with things of God, they are of God, and He's the judge, and He's the one that decides if it's fair or not. He's the one that decides what reward or what punishment can come out of it. And is it possible to fool God?
No.
Where's God?
He's everywhere.
Everywhere.
All
And
the
that,
time.
you know, I talked last time just a little bit. So again, we talked in here about God's timelessness. This is another thing of God's omnipresence. And both of those things are the things that I think we can't understand. If I'm not inside of someone, or if they don't know what I know, I might can fool them. So, you know, it's where we tend to think, well, no one's watching me here, I can get away with this, that, or the other. This is just the story of, no, you can't. But you've got to, again, learn to discipline yourself to understand who you're dealing with all the time. And that's where we talk about judgment. And what is judgment? And I don't guess we really know. Anyone know what judgment is for us? This was a pretty harsh judgment. but then are they gonna be judged again?
I've always wondered about that.
You mean like, when they,
Well, they'll stand before
Yeah.
God someday.
and they'll be judged for maybe things their sin is judged at the cross, period. Then the way you live, you know, what you did, what you didn't do, maybe, you know, weren't obedient in some ways.
Does anyone ever have biblically a real idea of what that will be? Do we know what that judgment will be? Is it
Well, we won't get our rewards. And you know, in our obedience, God tells us that we will be rewarded. But, you know, also it talked about the book of Revelation somewhere, which I don't have right here in front of me, but it's talking about there are going to be different levels of people, I mean, of jobs and everything else. So I think, you know, they say you get in by the skin of your teeth. I mean, you know what I mean?
As
You
long as
know,
you get in.
right. I mean, I think there are people that accepted them but did nothing with it. It just reminds me of the, you know, the master that gave the worker the coins and told him to invest it. You know that psalm, and one of them didn't. He just saved it. He said, you know, you're not going to get very much. I think that's just a symbolism of what's going to happen in the future.
what we're going to talk about now probably is more rewards on earth and more getting kind of what you gave on earth. And again, I will say for us, and are there rewards on earth to doing the right thing?
Yes.
And what would those rewards look like?
Well, first of all, joy. I mean, that you've done right. I mean, and you know, not everybody who's evil, you know, or that actually, you know, God blesses us through many things like me, Andy, and he's got a great job. He makes good money, you know, that's great. I mean, we've got kids. He blesses us through our kids. He gives us kids, and not just material things, but, you know, children. That's a huge blessing. And in Israel, that's how you were measured by your blessing, was how many kids you had, and then how many cattle you had, and possessions.
And what about punishments on earth?
We don't have that.
Does God give punishments on earth now?
Yes, it's consequences to our sin.
And how would those look?
Anywhere from a slap on the wrist to dropping dead.
Like the example in the sermon, you know, of King David, he lost that illegitimate child, and that was certainly some punishment, I believe, for his infidelity.
And I think that's the thing. It's very hard to see reward, punishment. It's very hard to know what God's intent is for whatever we see. And so I think, to me, you just have to still say, what in this world is God controlling? Everything. So would we agree? Nothing happens other than with the express intent from God. Is that correct? So whether it's punishment, whether it's reward, it came from God. Not everything that looks like punishment to me when I go through the Bible, not everything that happens to me that looks like punishment is punishment to me, though. Is that right?
Absolutely, Job.
Yeah.
You know, and
So every bad thing that happens to me, God didn't do that to punish me. And I think that's where people are able to wiggle out of God's control is, well, I didn't do anything. Why? And you mentioned Job. Well, you're not going to get to know why unless you can answer all these other questions about how I work. But some bad things that happen to you are direct punishment. And I think you have to be looking for God's presence in everything, or you're going to miss those things. And I think it's important to try to see when you're being punished. I think it's important to try to see when you're rewarded. if we can't look and see God's presence, then we're going to do like these folks did and kind of forget about God's presence is what we're going to do. And you know, it's interesting, I think, where we start here, these people probably either directly saw the Spirit come on some of the apostles or actually had the Spirit visibly come on them. Don't you think?
Probably.
Seems like that.
So here's a couple that directly are seeing miracles. They're seeing people healed miraculously. They're seeing all this stuff. Yet what did they do? They forgot who they're dealing with, didn't they? And isn't it so easy to do that? I mean, I'm just say we say if you don't pray for very long or read the Bible very long, where's God go? He didn't go anywhere. He goes out of your mind, though, doesn't he? Yeah. I mean, it's so easy to leave out church, leave out whatever, and that's saying, you know, God's out of your mind completely, and you're just not functioning with Him. So,
Let me piggyback on something you said here. You know, God may be punishing us for something, or He may not be punishing us, but allowing something bad to happen to maybe reroute us or something. And it's when that happens, when you see it happen to someone else, we're kind of like the Job's friends. We immediately think, well, now what did you do? What did you do to anger God? Well, but in their case, he did nothing. So I guess my point is, what is it? I have difficulty. I guess it's just me. I have difficulty when I see someone go through bad times. I'm guilty of looking at both sides going, I wonder if they're being punished for something, and I should say, you know, I wonder if God is punishing you for something, or is He directing you in a different path? You know, do you guys think about that? It's like, is it? Because I sure don't want to say, you know, it sounds like God's punishing you for something, and you need to admit it. You know, like a parent would. But it may not be that at all.
If you are a follower of Christ, you've got the Holy Spirit in you. If you've done something, you're being punished. Don't you sort of know?
And I think personally you will.
Personally,
Well, if I
now I
see it-
couldn't tell if that was going on with you,
Right.
but I think there's a difference between the believer and the unbeliever when
Oh.
things are going on that you can't tell. You personally would know inside. Yeah, I know why this is happening. Sometimes it's like you say, though, it's redirect. Trials make us stronger, and
Right.
make us more like Christ. But how do you can't tell the difference by looking at somebody else other than how they're walking through it.
Uh-huh.
If they're, you know, Job, I hadn't done anything wrong. And so do you believe that? Did his friends believe it? If somebody were to tell you that, well, I haven't done anything wrong, I don't know why this is happening. Do you believe that, or are you like Job's friends?
To
We're-
them,
we're
everything's
skeptical.
black and white.
It's like,
Yeah.
you know, well, surely there's something.
should we be bringing it up to people when you see things?
See, that's hard because I feel hypocritical. I said, you must have sin in your life. And but I know that but at the same time, he gives the deacons the authority to approach church members if there's wrongdoing, right?
You know what I've wondered? I've wondered, does it still happen now in the present time, like what happened to Job? You know, like what Randy and I talk about, that thing that was going on with Satan and God at the time.
Yeah.
Does that still happen? It
I
may
don't
still
know.
happen.
It is
It could.
Yeah,
We
he
don't
can do
know.
anything he wants.
it is very hard to correct people. We talk about in our office, people have terrible behaviors of healthcare and where they seek it and how they seek it. And you try to correct it, and there's virtually no way you can say it nicely. I mean, where you say, I mean, you know, and it's the same thing I think with God. How do you approach that? So should we approach it?
you know, a lot of the old prophets did it, you know?
Miss Raspberry, you lived back in a little older time.
I sure do.
Did y'all,
What
did
about
y'all approach that when you were growing up? I mean, has it changed from then to now, or was it swept under the table so much?
Well, a lot of times it was swept under the table. It depended on the situation. But like, I'm one of these people that believes the Lord is with me all the time. I mean, I know wherever I am, He is there too. And a lot of people don't believe that, you know. And I've never believed that anything that's bad happened to me was because He didn't love me. I mean, my husband went through quadruple heart surgery. He had surgery on Monday. He got out of the hospital on Thursday, and he was here at church on Sunday because he told the Lord if He would keep him healthy enough, he would be here. So for 42 years, he never missed. Then he had prostate cancer, and he had radiation, and that worked out okay too. And then he got this blood disorder, which I'm sure you all are familiar with. I'd never heard of it. My granddaughter did because she's in medicine. And the day that Steve had to talk to the man, or the man talked to Steve about hospice, he said, we don't know what causes it, and there is no cure. But with me being the type of person I am, and we've been married for 61 years after dating for 6 years, but I never thought that I was being punished by God because He took him away from us. And I know many people, this isn't going to sound nice, lose their religion over something that happens because they think they are being punished by the Lord.
So,
And I don't see, well, I can see, I guess, how people can feel this way because, I mean, just look at who He is.
so I'm going to ask something to make sure. So your husband made a promise to God, I will be in church every day.
Every Sunday.
And how long did that
We went
promise stay?
We went to Mexico with my sister and her husband and our 2 sons. And when we got back, he was talking. Now, we were one of these people that went to all the Razorback games in Arkansas every weekend. And one time we were discussing, why don't we quit buying tickets and quit going up there? Because we have to be back on Saturday night, and sometimes it's late. But he said, I have talked to the Lord, and I have told Him, if He will keep me healthy, I will be in church every Sunday at the First Baptist Church.
So we're supposed to keep our promises to God. Huh?
He also had charge of counting all the offering.
I would find that pretty unique this day and age where we felt like we made a promise to God that we truly feel compelled to keep every day and every week
I think it was,
forever.
well, before he passed away, a few years before that, the church honored him. I remember we were here, the church honored him for being one of the few or only people, the only. who had
Rick
not missed
said
church
one
in 40
Sunday-
years.
That he's in church more often than I am.
I think with your point to like breaking promises with God, I think that's easy to do as in our generations because it's the same thing. We won't keep promises with each other either. It's pretty easy. Promises don't really mean it like what they used to. Don't you agree? Well, no, they do mean that, but we don't keep them. We don't keep them. That's why everything has to be on paper.
Our word's not important.
There you go. That's what I'm
Yeah.
looking for.
It used to be a handshake.
And so even our promises to each other does it really mean? Oh, I didn't really get a promise.
So it's took that long to get to where we said what we want, what this lesson's about. Integrity is the name of this lesson. And that's what you're talking about there, isn't it? It's integrity.
Yeah.
And I would say this should be entitled Integrity to God, because if we have integrity with God, what about then our integrity with everyone else? It's there, isn't it? So that's what this is about, is integrity, but I think that's what we need to make a habit of, and what we're going to talk about is integrity to God, and understand everything else will follow. And what we're going to get is examples of positive integrity, and negative is what we're going to get. So the first is Barnabas. And Steve, I'm glad you're here, because you're going to tell us about Barnabas here in a minute. And this is Acts 4:36 and 37.
Dark shadows.
Joseph, a Levite and a Cypriot by birth, the one the apostles called Barnabas, which is translated son of encouragement, sold a field he owned, brought the money, and laid it at the apostles' feet. So Barnabas did what they were supposed to be doing. He had a field somehow, and he sold it, and he gave all the money to the apostles to use as they needed to for the church. And if you read between the lines, he did get a lot of praise within the church, and the apostles used that to kind of help other and all that. What about rewards from God? Did Barnabas get any of those? You know who Barnabas was, Steve?
Well, he was, a believer, obviously, and it says he was called the son of encouragement. He's known as an encourager. He accompanied Paul on several of his missionary journeys. He also, when Paul went on the first journey with Silas and Mark, and he got mad at Mark, so he kicked Mark out and said, no, you can't come back, because Mark didn't want to stay. And Barnabas encouraged him to take Mark back into the fold, so to speak. So he did. But Barnabas was always there as the encourager. He was the positive example in the church. If anything was going on, he would be the one that had the positive word to say to encourage people to keep on keeping on.
So would you say that he got a positive reward from God for this behavior?
I think he stored up treasures in heaven for that, yes.
And so Barnabas, and it was simple, and other people were doing this too, but he did the right thing that was called for him at the time, and did it and gave it all to God. And what I kind of want us to say is, how should we as believers be giving to God? What are we called to do?
Give cheerfully.
And I just ask so we kind of get straight. What are we called specifically by God to give?
10%
10% of what?
of what he blesses us with.
Cut after taxes or before.
Yes, I knew you were going to say that. How did Jesus answer? What's on that coin?
Okay.
Was Caesar?
Yeah, and so that's what God says, 10%. What Jesus say?
About
Any of it.
it's not only your math. It's only, not only the money aspect, but your time, your talent.
Your best.
Jesus pretty much took it all to the extreme, didn't he? Jesus probably would have said, well, if God says give you 10%, and Jesus did say that, what did he say to the young ruler who wanted to go to heaven? You got to give it all, didn't he?
Right.
So Jesus, when you read, always demanded more than God. But what was Jesus saying then? And he's saying, give what you need to support me, I think. Isn't that what Jesus was saying? To support others. And if you're saying others, who did Jesus say those other he might be? Did Jesus say that too? I might be the person without clothing.
Yeah, drink without.
The angel.
So who did Jesus say to give to? Everyone, didn't he? Did he say, as you can? No, he didn't. He
That's
just
their need.
He said, as they need. So Jesus was, how should we respond to what God asks us to give?
You just ought to do it. Whatever the need is, and you can feel it, then you need to do it because you're supposed to.
That-
Not because you're looking for praise from somebody, but just because you're supposed to do it.
That 10%'s a hard thing to muster. I mean, it is.
I don't think he needs to give 10% of ourselves. I think of us, he demands 100%.
And the 10%, then what would that be?
It's just extra.
So
The least.
at least. So where should that come out of our budget? The first 10%. I mean, that's what God asked for. Put it away before you do anything else. And so, you know, I mean, if you're just trying to figure out what God asked for, to be honest, you get a check for 8,000, and you look at the number and you say, okay, no, I got a check for 7,200. That's what God asked for, plain and simple. 10% out of the top. No looking at any other part of your budget before you do that. Now we certainly we're pretty good at figuring ways around that, I think. Where we say, well, does he mean before taxes? Does he mean after taxes? Does he mean after rent? Does he mean before rent? Does he mean,
He means first.
he means first, doesn't he? And that's what we're good. So that's integrity. And you know, it is hard it's hard to figure out. I think you said it, isn't it? What you said, Randy, this day and age, we have ways to figure out to justify all around those things, don't we? I mean, well, I've got to make a payment if I don't have that 10% because I've got 14 other payments I got to make this month. What would God say to do?
Get rid of those payments.
You need to go sell that four-wheeler
Get out of that.
because I didn't really want you to have that. That's what God would say to do if he could come down and talk to you, wouldn't he? And he would probably say, oh, and by the way, also the boat and also that new car, because if you're so close to it that you can't make that one payment, maybe you need to clean up some other stuff too. And you know that, but anyway, integrity, God says give 10%. What about when we ask other things? How should we give that? We should give it at God's feet. Put it there. And it's really tough with the church to me. Really tough with the church. We got asked for some money not long ago, real recently, and it is hard to lay money at the apostles' feet. It is for me anyway. I want to be able to say what I want them to spend that money on. Don't I? Anyone else like that? It is, isn't it? We want to say, sure, you can have my money, but this is where I want it to go. That was not Barnabas's example here that God gave us. So that's the good example, though, and what we want to do. And then I want to talk about the bad example here, and I want us to be real careful because we've talked about the good example and understand who they were trying to fool here and what that example, what made their example so grievous versus what we're likely to do sometimes and the punishment. So the next part is going to be Exhibit B, Ananias, and this is 5:1-6. But a man named Ananias with his wife Sapphira sold a piece of property. However, he kept that part of the proceeds with his wife's knowledge and brought a portion of it and laid it at the apostles' feet. Then Peter said, Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and keep back part of the proceeds from the field? Wasn't it yours while you possessed it? And after it was sold, wasn't it at your disposal? Why is it that you plan this thing in your heart? You have not lied to men, but to God. When he heard these words, Ananias dropped dead, and a great fear came on all who heard. The young man got up, wrapped his body, carried him out, and buried him. Anyone want to reconsider your offering from this morning? I go, I've got a calculator right here if anyone needs. So why is this so terrible?
How did he know?
The Holy Spirit told Peter.
Oh,
It doesn't
okay.
really say how, other than the Holy Spirit knew, and he said he was filled with the Spirit.
Oh.
And he just told him, it's like, hey, this guy just lied.
Wow.
And it wasn't what they did. If they had just been what's the word anyway, if they'd have been truthful about it and say, okay, we sold this property, we're gonna give half of it here, they would have got the praise they were looking for. They would have got the blessing. I think it wasn't the fact that God's telling them, you got to sell the whole thing and give it to me. It's just the way they went about it.
Is it because they lied?
They pretended
Wow.
to be giving that, oh, it's such a burden here. Look at what I'm doing. I'm going to lay all this money out here. I'm keeping half of it, by the way, but don't tell anybody. And that was the sin. It wasn't the fact that they only gave part of it. It was the fact that they pretended to give the whole thing and
Give
tried to
praise
dupe
and
all the congregation, and they're giving them a pat on the back or pity for whatever they did. They just wanted the attention.
Sometimes it's not the wrong you do, but it's the nature.
Mhm. The way you go about it.
So you think, different way to look, if you say that, you think they clearly knew God said, you're to give all this? You think Ananias?
They've been told that, have they?
It doesn't say. I never really could decide whether they actually felt the Spirit urged them to give it all, or if they just simply wanted the accolades for doing it. And so they just concocted this scheme and said, well, we're not going to give it all. We're going to keep some of it back.
So Steve, I'm going to say,
I don't know. Where does it say?
you're our historian, so are there other examples of God punishing like this?
Of this, well, the lesson talks about Achan, and if you remember Achan, we can run down to the 4-year-old class because that's what they're studying today, which I thought was pretty cool that our lessons tied together. But Achan was the one that they went and they had just conquered Jericho, so the whole Israelite nation's on a big high, and then they go to Ai. And it's like, oh, that piddly little thing. Well, no big deal. We don't even have to send the whole army. And they got their tails kicked. And they came back and said, why? And God said, because there's sin in the camp. Well, Achan had stolen some silver and a cloak and some other stuff and hid it. And then he got called out, and they ended up taking him and his family and stoning them because of the sin. But the word that says, the Hebrew word for what he did, is the same thing that what Ananias and Sapphira did, is that there's almost embezzlement, I think is what it calls it in here.
So they're basically deceiving God somehow is what they're trying to do. And that would be the thing I would say here, for whatever reason. They thought they were trying to deceive people, but they weren't. They were deceiving God. And I would take that a step forward, and then I'll let you talk. But they knew what they should have done, or they wouldn't have been deceiving God. So they knew what they were supposed to do, or it wouldn't have mattered to God, because God would have said, well, they gave some. That's great. That's it. So I think they knew what they were supposed to do. Go ahead.
I just think that men, in general, men and women, but we think that, and I'm including myself, think that we know better than God. And, we don't see the blessings that God's can in the future that he would lay upon us. But it also, God's plan is and I can see this so clearly, especially with me, is, you got to have a boat, you got to have a 4-wheeler, you got to have a cabin, you got to have this. Everything is a huge burden. The older you get, get rid of all this stuff. I don't really need the maintaining it is the hardest part, And so if we all listen to what God laid out the plan, if we all put in 10%, then then we would have an overabundance of things. You know, we wouldn't have to have that.
And I would say this for our young people here. So how many of us old people, how many of us old people have something that we could easily give to God and the church, never know we lost it,
Right.
and be perfectly happy?
Oh, yeah. You get in your 50s and then you give everything away that you collected in your 20s.
Except
Like, why did I even start?
We can give him our pickup,
Yeah.
I can't give away
So,
fast enough.
so yes,
but he's gonna have to pay the tax.
so,
But that's true. You don't have to taxes anymore on it. You don't have to go
Right.
maintain it anymore.
so
I
what
mean, all of that. It's just
and that's what I
It
wanted to
steps
just ask when we do. So Peter said, Ananias, why Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit, keep part of the proceeds from the field. Wasn't it yours while you possessed it? And after it was sold, wasn't it yours to give? And all he's saying is, why in the world did you lie? Because whatever you did, if you had done it sincerely, would have been good.
Yeah.
And that's what I said, that we tried to deceive God like this. And I think the biggest thing, let's just say, how about our own tithe? Well, what do we all start from the start? Well, is that net or gross? What are we trying to do? We're trying to figure out how to,
save money.
Well,
See,
if you
if we
say
have to do
gross,
so
then you're
much.
covered on the net.
yeah.
But if you don't have it, you don't have it. So
Right.
Right, yeah,
how can you give what you don't have?
yeah.
So,
That's how I feel.
But
It's
just the lady that
I
Judy
guess after
said,
taxes.
whenever the old lady, she gave everything she had, that whatever it was, a penny or
And I-
something.
I might.
And I
one or two
think the
might.
answer to that is simple.
Your
Yes,
heart.
we've all tried to deceive God in those ways. And what is the answer? Give what you ought to give.
And give it
No-
cheerfully.
Know what God asks you to give, whether it's 10%, whether it's 5%, whether it's 1%. Know what God asks you to give and give it, and figure out how to give it and give it cheerfully. And that's the thing they did not do. So the next one, we're gonna run out of time here.
It's hard to be a Christian.
It is. So
Isn't it?
So then here comes Exhibit C, Sapphira. There was an interval of about 3 hours, and his wife came in not knowing what had happened. Tell me, Peter asked her, did you sell the field for this price? Yes, she said, for that price. Then Peter said to her, why did you agree to test the Spirit of the Lord? Look, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out. Instantly she dropped dead at his feet. When the young men came in, they found her dead and carried her out and buried her beside her husband. Then great fear came on the whole church and on all those who heard these things.
Yeah, I
You
think
think
so.
those guys came back a third time, or were they scared to come back?
So
I don't think nobody sold anything else.
that was
The
the end
young
of the
men was
sermon.
like, okay, I'm not going to step foot back in there again. Drop him dead, and we have to go bury him, and it's a scary place.
Well, see, I think differently. I think, man, you drop dead, you don't feel anything, and you're in the presence of the Lord. That's good for me. I mean, I'm just saying. I just think,
And-
it's
and so
better. It's
let's-
always better to be in the presence of the Lord.
Let's talk about that briefly. One, again, what did she think, her response? She thought it ought to be easy to fool people, right?
Yeah.
That's what she thought. What did she find out? Can't fool God. I mean, that was that lesson.
But every one of us in here would drop dead. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
just
we've all
saying,
tried that,
every
haven't we?
lied. I mean, you know what I mean?
I
Everybody
mean,
sinned.
that's what I still will go
Wipe out
back and
humanity
say.
like that.
We all
Yeah.
struggle with that. We've talked for a long time. We've struggled with that timelessness of God greatly. We struggle with that omnipresence of God just as much. Who truly can feel God in their head with every decision they make? And, again, we make a lot of decisions with God in our head, but we make decisions. I'll say we. I make decisions thinking I'll make this one and then I'll consult God. Right?
Back brief.
Mhm.
Yeah, well,
Not for permission, but
and that is where that is again misinterpreting the omnipresence of God. Because God was already there saying, gosh, what are you going to do? You're going to make that decision on your own. And then you're going to call me. Come on.
so my whole answer to this is we shouldn't, it's like, okay, I just gotta be quiet, don't open your mouth, keep your ears open, and don't do anything. I mean, it's absolutely impossible to do that.
Before we finish this lesson, I want to make sure, because they're going to turn us off, so we understand. Presuming these people were true believers of God, and we could argue that or not, but presuming they were, where are they at right now?
Heaven.
They are in heaven, aren't they? So could God punish us so much like this to actually take our life from us, and then we show up in heavens and get rewards in heaven? Absolutely. And that's a tough one, because we would all read this and think, well, they're just gone, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
That presuming they were truly of God, then they are in heaven and they are reaping whatever rewards. They did have to, or will have to, we don't know that time frame but they will stand before God for judgment. This may be brought up again. They may get, you think that judgment was bad, watch this one. I mean, I don't know, but what I do know is if they were truly saved, they did not lose their salvation by this. They got a harsh punishment, and I will say then God did this for an example to us, didn't
Right, exactly.
he? Would God really do that? Would
Yes.
he take my life as an example
I would think
to
so.
future generations?
Yeah.
He would, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. This is a tough story. It's scary, but it's also something for you to know. If you have God's spirits, even if you violate God so much that he decides to remove you from the earth, he is still not going to take your salvation away. We would strive not to have him judge us. I bet you, too, their little talk with God when they got to heaven.
Only just a little bit.
I said, Mom said, I've got my new name, and I hear me laughing. I bet these people did not say that. I bet
Why are we here?
Any comments? Good, simple lesson, I think, but it is something that is difficult for us and always will be difficult for us. But I think you said it best. Listen, don't speak. Where was it?